thanks for showing up, guys. Really glad to see each and every one of you. As a speaker, we get paid per head. So glad you're here. Just kidding, we don't. But it's nice to see you guys, especially for a topic like this, addiction and idolatry, which is something that a lot of people, you're the exceptions, a lot of people like to keep their distance from. And those who get close to this issue usually have their own story that brings them to this issue. That's true for me, and I want to introduce my co-presenter, Eric. Eric, why don't you tell us a little bit about how you came to value recovery? Can you just tell us a short snippet of kind of how long you've been working on sobriety?
I've been sober since June 6, 1998. So for you non-math people, that's 21 and a half years. I was a retread, meaning that I had 5 years sobriety and I relapsed, started over with my time, and I got serious, I got busy, I got into the Fellowship of AA, and that's where I found my sobriety.
Yep. So I have been sober since 2011. My drug of choice was pornography and masturbation, so sexual addiction is a huge piece of my story, and again, I've been sober since 2011. So Eric has a lot of experience in teaching through AA, so 12 steps specifically with AA has really been what he came to sobriety through. And for me, it was Freedom Fighters actually in this church. So many of you may know about that ministry, and that's what helped me kick that habit for good. So that's kind of how we both come to this issue, and I want to talk about idolatry and when things start going sideways. And it's an interesting term, idolatry, because many of us think about idols. If we think about them at all, we think about strange little Buddhas or statuettes, and it doesn't really translate that much. But I think Jesus opens the door when he says you can't serve both God and money. Mammon is the word he uses when he says the love of money is the root of all evil. And what Jesus is talking about there is the architecture of idolatry. So he's acknowledging there that money in particular can become for people an idol. So what is an idol? An idol is something that organizes your thinking, it organizes your behavior, and it creates for you loyalty, that you are loyal to that experience, you're loyal to that opportunity. So you just think about, what are the things in your life that you are loyal to? And that's the raw material, that's the substructure for the potential of idolatry to develop. In the 1500s, one of the reformers, John Calvin, he said that the human heart is basically an idol factory. You take one out, and the human heart seems to put something else in its place. And idolatry is really, really appealing, because an idol offers you the illusion of control. That idol, whatever that is, and if we use Jesus' words, for instance, money, what is it that money offers us that makes it so enticing to chase, so enticing to be loyal to, for instance, money? And it offers control, it offers escape, it offers status. It seems to offer peace of mind, at least when you think you have enough of it. So just understanding that those are the raw material for idolatry. It doesn't mean that money has to be an idol for you. It doesn't. But human people have a real blind spot when it comes to idolatry. Even noble things. When you think about, for instance, Jesus going head-to-head with those religious leaders of his day, and they had turned what is honorable, that is the law of God, into an idol. The law of God was supposed to be a means to an end. It was supposed to take you to the mercy and grace of God. But those religious leaders turned it into an end in and of itself. You got to get so good at following all these rules. This is the point. The rules are the point. So that demonstrates that those religious leaders, those Pharisees, Sadducees, the Sanhedrin, they were totally locked into that basic architecture of idolatry with the law of God, of all things. How could the law of God become something that could be substituted for an idol. So, to know that idols come in all shapes and sizes, we want to talk about the dynamics of addiction. How do you know when things start to go sideways? Where does something turn from being helpful in your life to actually starting to chew up more and more of your heart, and what to do about it? So that's the organization that I founded. So I do counseling, consulting, coaching, crisis management, and my card's on the back. So if you ever want to keep these conversations going, Eric's on the New Day team as well. So we lead groups, and we also do counseling together. And I also do counseling, yes, at my home office in Manitowoc, which is where I'm from, but also via Zoom. So I work with people through the computer as well. If that's something that you're interested in doing, just grab my card. And this is my fam. So bigger kids, 2 in college, well, 3 in college, and a couple at home, and then that little fur baby. We love little Ben. He's a good guy. And so I just want to talk a little bit about the basics of addiction. And again, if you're in AA, if you're in Freedom Fighters, this is something that you learned as you went through it. So escaping reality. And what I've discovered is that most of us instinctively know how to escape reality. Like, we've figured out ways to do that. And that can come in a lot of different forms. But, for instance, it can come in a bottle, it can come in pornography, but it also can come in that, I don't know, 46 Chevy that's in your garage and has been there for the last 15 years, right? I mean, that could be a way of escaping reality. Your wife's frustrated that you're not getting stuff done around the house, or your kids are squirrely and you're not sure what to do about it, or work sucks because you've got your foreman's on your butt about X, Y, or Z. But not there, not when you're pounding out a fender, not when you're rebuilding the engine, not when you're working in a way that allows you to feel like you're getting something done. That's a way to escape reality. Is it bad? Is it bad to have a hobby? Should we all just be sitting around doing nothing? No. But what's the function of what you're doing? Is it therapeutic to be in a boat with a rod in your hand? Yes, that's therapy. Yes, it is. You just have to ask yourself, while I'm here, what am I not wanting to engage back home, or in my work life, in my family life? What am I not wanting to engage? That's worth asking. And if you say to yourself, no, I'm pretty engaged. I'm pretty engaged at work. I'm pretty engaged at home. I'm pretty engaged in my marriage. Then chances are you're not using that hobby or activity to escape reality. I mean, something as good as training for a marathon. Some guys love running. I tried 3 half marathons. What I was chasing was the runner's high. It's a myth. It doesn't exist. Just telling you. I'll save you all those miles. It doesn't exist. So, yeah, that was sad for me. But escaping reality is something you do want to reflect on. Like, how invested am I? What is in my reality that makes it so tempting to pop out? And then if you've got substances that are helping you leave reality, that just supercharges this. So when you don't have chemical addiction operating through a substance, and I would argue that pornography is a chemical addiction because of how it hijacks what's going on in your brain, the way in which it supercharges the chemicals that are produced during arousal. There is definitely chemical components to what's happening in your brain as you're being exposed to those images. So again, when you're talking about chemical addiction, that adds another layer of complexity on top of this question. So the other piece is medicating pain. And the escaping reality doesn't have to be modeled to you as an individual for you to know how to do it. It's just instinctive, like blinking. You touch a hot stove, you pull away. So pain is something humans just instinctively stay away from. So escaping reality, painful reality, doesn't have to be modeled. Medicating pain, however, that's something that's often modeled in families. So when the Bible talks about curses of the fathers being visited on the sons, I really do think that part of curses that can be handed down in generations is watching how grandma, grandpa, dad, mom handled their own pain. How did they engage their pain? And they had loads of it because they're just normal people, right? So how did they handle the untimely deaths in the family? How did they handle the job losses? How did they handle the divorces? How did they handle the chronic illnesses? How were those things managed? I mean, as a kid, growing up, how did you watch those situations being managed in your home? What was the stories that were told about how your family handled hard things? So if you have a history of addiction, and specifically chemically based addiction, chances are medicating pain was something you were mentored in, something that you were nurtured in. That the tie to your addiction goes well beyond your own personal choices. It includes those. But you were part of a much bigger system that had a lot invested in escaping reality and medicating pain. And in our neck of the woods, with lots and lots of immigrants in the last century and before, coming from Northern Europe, Germany in particular, and especially in this neighborhood, a lot of Dutch, right? So, but Germans in particular, especially Milwaukee, Manitowoc. Beer. It's all about beer. And beer is one of those things that can help medicate pain effectively. And so the next workshop I'm going to be doing is talking about anxiety and depression. And I think that alcohol is one of the most effective ways for Joe average person to medicate a mood disorder. I wouldn't recommend it because it does a lot of other things that depress you, but it does certainly relax you. So if you're chronically anxious, if you're dealing with the pain of futility, sadness, loneliness, definitely that is a drug that is easy to get and works well and has been usually in most families, because of immigrant families, modeled for generations as a coping mechanism. So, I want to talk a little bit about the addiction cycle, but before I do, Eric, do you want to jump in with anything so far?
I'm probably going to touch on a lot of what you're talking more on a personal basis.
Okay, got it. Roger that. Well, I'll turn it over to you in just a couple minutes. So, what I want to touch on here, this is called the addiction cycle, and it works in any form of addiction that's built on those two premises of medicating pain and escaping reality. And what I like about this particular diagram that's put out by Fight the New Drug, and that's working to help people become free of pornography. It's not actually a Christian organization, but it's got great material, and this graphic's just one of the many resources they have. They talk about choice points. And up here, what they're trying to identify is there are discomforts in life that all of us encounter. What they say here are these discomforts are normal, but they're significant. Just because they're common doesn't mean they ought not affect you. So loneliness is one of the things that gets people off track big time. And loneliness is as common as the sunset. Everyone struggles with loneliness or futility. Like, what I'm doing doesn't matter. I don't know that anyone cares whether I'm here or not. That sense of despair. Though they're normal, they're not insignificant. And so how do you model, how has that pain been modeled? Often for many of us, we weren't given the tools to engage those very strong and unpleasant emotions. We weren't given the tools. So we did what we knew. We did what was modeled. We did what was instinctive. That's actually the decision. That's the choice point. So in addiction, the thing that keeps this whole engine of addiction rolling, what gives it its energy, it's the triggering experiences of your life. The emotions that happen to you that provide a desire to escape from that kind of pain. It's instinctive. There's nothing wrong with wanting to get away from the pain. What I'm saying, though, is for those of us who move into an addictive type of cycle, where it starts are those triggers. And then we decide, I'm going to just start going on what's kind of like running a program in the background. I'm going to be going on screensaver. I'm going to be kind of operating at a very low level of interest. For me, in my sexual addiction, what that meant was I would think about, oh man, when's the last time I hopped on the computer and looked for porn? Well, that was a long time. Oh yeah, I promised myself I'd never do that again, right? So I'd start telling myself I'm not going to do that again, but what am I doing? I'm thinking about the last time I was using. It's called euphoric recall. I'm remembering the upside of using without all of the garbage that comes after you use. So that's what starts happening here. I'm starting to think, oh, I don't know, maybe I won't use. Maybe I will. Yeah, my wife's going to be out of town this weekend. Oh, no, not good. Right? So I'm starting to dance with my addiction, real low level. What they acknowledge here is there is a place where when I'm in recovery, I can start to recognize that I'm dancing with the idea of using again. That I'm starting to get into patterns of behavior that are connected to how I use. When I start getting focused on recovery, I start recognizing that. But I start recognizing it mostly because I'm in group. That's the thing I want to really encourage you guys to think about. Is if any of this resonates with you and you feel like, yeah, there might be some addictive qualities going on in my life, it's really important for you to stop flying solo. I know you want to beat this, and you also want to maintain your self-respect and your standing in your peer group. I get it. But that desire and recovery are usually mutually exclusive. Like you'll keep dancing with the addiction, falling, struggling, and sobriety that's long-term is going to remain elusive as long as you stay managing it all by yourself. So getting into relationship with other guys who are working on the same issues, that's going to start shifting your recovery into a different mode. And certainly that's my experience, but I'm not the only guy here who can say that that's true as well. So understanding that when you start getting into a group of guys and they're listening to you talk about how you're not using or how your wife's traveling, but you have no plan of how you're going to manage yourself when she's gone, that'll send up red flags for the rest of the guys in your group, being like, are you just going to put it on cruise control and hope for the best? What are you going to do here, Pat? I mean, you struggle with pornography, nobody's around, how are you going to manage your loneliness, right? My group is going to be engaging me. I'm not sure I'd be capable of pushing into my own stuff that hard, that intensely, but it's needed. So I can break this cycle right here. But let's say I blow past this choice point. Then I start moving into ritual. And ritual is that side of the behavior where I start getting into patterns of behavior that lead me to using. So one of the guys in the group, he knew he was in ritual when he's starting to drive past the strip joints. And then he finds himself parked in the parking lot. He's not going in, but he's starting to exhibit the behaviors that are all lined up to move in one direction. And that's a ritualistic behavior. So for me, even walking in the back door, knowing that nobody's home, that was the start of a ritual for me. Clomping up the back steps, plunking my stuff down. I start thinking about the computer. Well, I should check the news. Right? So I check the news. And then I start reading triggering news stories that have something to do with sexuality. And then I start moving from there to images, and then, now I'm off and running. And that's all ritual. It's designed to walk you right up to the edge of using, and then put so much energy behind it, you don't want to step back. You need the release because there's so much energy pressing down on you. Good news is, even when you're in ritual, you've got a choice point. And you can go to your group of guys. But again, if you're on your own, then that's the only thing that's going to be fighting all of that pressure that you're putting on yourself. So then when you use, you get temporary relief. That lasts, in my case, about 7.5 seconds. And then I get all these awful feelings. Oh, here I am again. God, you must be tired of hearing from me. There's something broken with me. I must be some kind of different kind of God. So despair sets in. And what does despair do? It adds to that reservoir of triggering emotions. It adds to the emotional pain I have to manage now. But it becomes the giant flashing light. It weighs a lot to manage that sense of despair after I've let myself down, let my family down, let my God down. And it ramps up this. And then you just lather, rinse, and repeat for years and years and years. I was on this cycle as a 7-year-old kid before I knew any of this. But I was using masturbation to cope with the loneliness, abandonment, and neglect of my home. I didn't know that. And I went to a Baptist Christian school, so I learned right away, I'm doing something naughty. I shouldn't be doing this. So despair became a constant companion for me as I was trying to cope with really unpleasant emotions. And I grew up in a family where that wasn't modeled, how to engage difficult emotions in a healthy way. So, in a way, I was set up, but getting into Freedom Fighters, having this start to get taught, having other guys work in the same program, joining that group of guys, that proved life-changing for me. So I really want to encourage you guys to be thinking about if any of this resonates. Where is it a group of men working on that issue that you want to push into? Eric, turn it over to you.
Oh, my third. Okay. Can I try this over here?
All right.
If you don't mind. And actually, I think I'm going to sit down if you guys don't mind.
Here's my PowerPoint. Can you guys see that in the back? All right, awesome. Like I said, I've been sober for 21 and a half years. But I don't know if I've been spiritually sober that long. Walking into Alcoholics Anonymous for the first time, I believed myself to be an agnostic. I didn't believe in God. There was many opportunities for me to see that God had touched my life in one way, shape, or another, or that people were trying to. My grandma was very religious, and she prayed for me every day, and she made it a point to let me know that. So I was already setting myself up for this fall of turning my will and my life over to God, or trying to find that spirituality in my life to help me succeed in recovery. In my research, preparing for this morning, I found that it said spirituality is a connection that will bring you back to healing. You have to heal from the inside out to find peace, love, and joy, and acceptance. Acceptance is something that I struggled with for a very long time. Growing up, my dad was very tyrannical, and child of the 70s that I was, spanking was, prevalent in the house, and I didn't know what the rules were, because it just depended upon what kind of a mood Dad was in, depended upon if I got spanked or not, or if I got yelled at, or if I got grounded, or if I got sent to my room. So I spent a lot of time alone, of my own devices. Satan tells us that we are not acceptable and that we are not loved. And then we look for it in all the wrong places. And like Pat had mentioned, alcohol was accessible in my house. Dad and Mom had a tapper in the basement, fully stocked bar. My parents actually smoked pot. So, discovery of Dad's plate underneath the living room couch, and dabbling around with that and some of the older friends. pain medicating. I was self-pain medicating is what I was doing. Because Satan was constantly in my ear telling me that I wasn't worth anything. That when I was supposed to be developing those peer groups and that social status and that whatever, I'm looking at my friends and feeling less than. And not feeling that I measured up even in the eyes of my Father. You know, that I was constantly trying to prove myself and always falling short. So that fueled my addiction. You know, what started out to be the social weekend warrior kind of guy, you know, hanging out with my friends, whatever, I took that home. I took that to my bedroom. I took that to not going to school, faking illnesses so I could drink, so I could feel that euphoric feeling. That was always progressively getting, the tolerance level was building. It was progressively getting to a higher amount to where it was getting harder to hide the alcohol that I was stealing from my parents, or hiding the fact that I was stealing marijuana from my dad, you know. And I had heard in AA the term "fake it till you make it," and meaning you just need the willingness to be willing to have the willingness to believe in God. That's basically how it was explained to me. Because I was struggling with that spirituality. I was struggling with the fact that, okay, now what do I do? Well, it doesn't matter what you pick, a conception of your own God, or it could be the doorknob, or a tree, or whatever. And I had a hard time wrapping my brain around that. And I had a hard time trying to work the 12 steps about godliness without having some kind of a higher power in my life. And I'm asking everybody that I knew, and I'm asking speakers at speaker meetings, and trying to go to like workshops like this and try to find that, what's that mean in spirituality, and falling short. I had a sponsor that was a Christian man, and he would tell me, you know, I would tell him my problem, whatever it was, and he would say, well, read pages 62 and 63 in the big book. Well, I read it so many times that I had it memorized. You know, selfishness and self-centeredness, that we think is the root of all our troubles, driven by hundreds of forms. Fear, self-delusion, self-pity. We step on the toes of our fellows, and they retaliate seemingly without provocation. Cattle learn by repetition, and it was just over and over and over again. But I had no idea what that meant. I had no understanding of that. So every time I'd call him, and I'd be blaming all my shortcomings on someone else, my wife, my boss, you know, whatever, and not taking responsibility for my own actions. You know, yeah, if you don't go to work, yeah, you're going to get fired. If you don't go to work on a regular basis, you know, and it was just all these cycles that I was bringing back into my recovery from my previous life. And he's like, yeah, read page 62 and 63 in the big book and pray for guidance. And, well, this is not helping me because A, I don't really believe in God. Two, you know, it's like I don't see where the selfishness is. So how do I move past that? You know, it's almost like Daffy Duck. Daffy Duck had the devil on one shoulder and the angel on the other shoulder, and the devil's telling him to do this, but he knew better that he shouldn't do this, and the angel's on this shoulder telling him to do that. And that's how I can think about this in my own world, is that I know the difference between right and wrong, and I know what I'm supposed to do, but to try to put those two things together, that's where I struggle. Now, all this time I'm like stumbling through AA and not drinking. I'm not happy either, you know. And my marriage is falling apart, and you know, I'm having kids, and I'm unemployable. I'm jumping from job to job to job to job, and I can't move forward beyond where I was at. And I'm like, this is sobriety. I might as well drink.
You know, it's that little devil telling me that I'm not good enough, that I can't even get sober right, and I have all these resources to my exposure. You know, in the Fox Valley, there's 125 AA meetings. There's absolutely no reason why, if you have a propensity towards alcohol and that you want to find help, you have all these resources to dive into. I actually got sober in Kakana, and you know, the group that I got sober in was more than half with double-digit sobriety. That I had all that experience to draw off of, and these poor guys were subjected to my anger and my discontentedness and my, you know, trying to fake it till I make it kind of concept, I guess. And you know, I sponsored a ton of guys over the years, and you know, service work kept me sober, but it didn't give me that inner peace or spirituality that I was searching for. You know, it was more about me. So I was doing the polar opposite of what my sponsor was telling me about, you know, try to grab this conception of what selfishness is about, and I'm doing all this service work based on how it makes me feel, and it wasn't about the still suffering alcoholic. So, if you want to talk about idolatry, I used Alcoholics Anonymous as my idolatry. I took one addiction, alcoholism, and poured that into AA. I was going to 3-4 meetings a week. I was sponsoring. At one point in time, I had sponsored up to 10 guys at one time. We were doing meetings in my house, starting meetings all over the valley, going to conferences, going to service functions, doing all this stuff. My wife, my now ex-wife, told me, I saw you more when you were drinking. That's a problem. But I didn't see it because I'm thinking, well, this is something that's supposed to be healthy for me. This is something that's supposed to help me. This is changing me. You don't understand how this makes me feel. But it's everything that this says. Everything. And it gives it that disguise of being good. So where he was talking about money, job, your car in the garage, you know, working on your bike, or you know, whatever, you gotta look at it as if you're questioning if I have a problem with drinking or if I have a problem with addiction, and you're looking at it, if it causes consequences in your life and they're not good consequences, that's probably something that you should take a look at. You know, you have that opportunity where Pat has his cards out on the table, and if you just want to ask some questions about, okay, this is where I'm at, you know, and you can take an assessment and say, yeah, you know, maybe this is something that I have a problem with, or maybe this is something that I need to take a look at. You know, you can, there's umpteen million resources out there on the internet, and umpteen million opportunities for you guys to find something, some kind of truth. In my research, and it's kind of funny because it's like the last 6 years, and I don't want to say that this is the right way of doing it, but in the 15 years that I was sitting in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous and I was struggling with trying to find that higher power, that conception of God or whatever, my life fell apart. I found a girl who was into going to church and Christian and all this stuff, which was totally foreign to me after my divorce, and we started going to church together, and I started to find out about spiritual gifts, and I started to find out about the fact that I am good enough, and that I can have a personal relationship with my higher power, or God, and I can get to know Him through the Bible, and that I finally found where that spirituality came. It had to come from in here, and it had to come from the Holy Spirit. And sitting in church one morning, the Holy Spirit did touch my heart, and I felt something different. And So the last 6 years, I've been using Christ as my higher power, and the spirituality and the changes that people have seen, even in my AA friends, and there's something different about me. I just don't know what it is, but there's something different about you. So it gives me that opportunity to talk about my new best friend, and it gives me the opportunity to share with my non-AA, my now Christian friends about recovery. And it also gives me the opportunity to dive in a little deeper. How many of you guys have done character development class or journey classes? A couple of you. I've done some over the past 4 years with Pat's help and others these classes as well. And to do story work and to really dive into the why. Why did I get to that point? Not thinking that I drank because my friends drank and I have the propensity to be an alcoholic because it's in my genetic nature, and you go through the whole scientific facts of it, or I'm predisposed because genetically, my dad was an alcoholic and his dad, and so on and so on. So you can go down that road, or you can do like I did and try to figure out, bombard it with knowledge. And I went to school and became educated in drug and alcohol classes or whatever to find out why I became an alcoholic. And through a couple of weeks of doing a journey class and really taking a look and peeling back the layers of my life and just looking at, I was set up. I was set up by Satan. I was set up to be the person that I came to be. And unfortunately, or fortunately, depends on your perspective, I became an alcoholic. And somehow I didn't kill myself during the process, and somehow here I am today talking to you and being able to share this. I think that's about all I have.
Okay. Thanks, Eric. So, what we talked about earlier, and Eric, what I appreciate about what you were just emphasizing in the last couple of minutes is relationship. And relationship with the living God, Jesus Christ, God in flesh. That changed his life. Changed my life. Changed a lot of your guys' life. That's stepping out of isolation into relationship. But you probably know this if you've sat around in church at all. But when Jesus ascended, he turned over discipleship to people. He turned over growing people in the knowledge of Jesus. He turned that over to the disciples. And he said, keep doing this. Teach people. That's all about relationship and connection. You're not actually supposed to be able to beat habitual sin on your own. It wasn't God's plan. It's not supposed to be you and Jesus against the world. So I just want to push hard on the instinct that all of you have of, I just want to rely on myself. And I just want to call that for what it is, which is foolishness. The Bible calls that foolishness. Relying on yourself is foolishness. Proverbs says, thank you. Proverbs says there is a way that seems right to a man, but where does it end? Anybody who knows that verse?
Yes.
The end is death. That's where it goes. All you guys are trying to do the right thing and be the right kind of man. I'm sure you all aspire to that. But in and of yourself, it's going to lead to destruction. I mean, Eric told the story. He's doing a good thing. And his marriage is crumbling. And his parenting is suffering. And there's an emptiness gnawing at him on the inside. He's trying to do the right thing. But it wasn't connected to Jesus Christ. It wasn't connected to that group of discipling believers. So I can't say enough, and thank you so much for what you're saying about pride. And that is a huge thing. It's a stumbling block. And what's the first step?
That they didn't wear Carlos.
It takes guys long time to admit I'm not enough to take care of this. Guys will dance with that for a long, long time. Not only is fighting addictive tendencies on your own foolish, it's also really, really hard. And as was said, really it's the root of pride. And the Lord draws near, if you know that verse, the Lord draws near to the humble, but He stiff-arms the proud. You want to get close to the Lord? You've got to humble yourself. AA's figured that out. That's just one of the many groups. You step in the door at AA, you're starting to push on that prideful insistence that I can do this all by myself. So, lots of communities to get into. Alcoholics Anonymous, Sexaholics Anonymous, Overeaters Anonymous. They're all in the Valley. Freedom Fighters, right here in this church, specifically focused on helping you build and maintain sexual integrity. That you can be the man you've aspired to be. And in my life, it was a deal changer. Totally changed my life. I'm living a level of sobriety I've never known. Aspired to for my whole life, but never knew until I got into community here at Freedom Fighters. And then Celebrate Recovery, which is done here. And then Jeff, you just want to raise your hand. He does it at Pathways, is that right? So you want to know something about Celebrate Recovery there? Talk to Jeff. We got some Freedom Fighter guys in the room, right? So just want to acknowledge Peter, okay, these guys. Good. They've been fighting a good fight. And if that's an issue that resonates with you, these are guys that you can connect with as well. They're working it. You're still working recovery, right?
Absolutely.
You're leading groups.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I lead the Christ the Rock has two groups, a Tuesday night group for the guys who work during the day. I lead the Thursday morning group for the guys who work second or third shift. So, do you mind if I just throw my contact info on the board there?
Yeah,
In case
go for it.
someone wants to come. Okay.
Yeah. So we have just a handful of minutes left. Any comments or questions? Yeah.
You talked about involving a group of men to support you and
Yep.
keep you accountable.
Yep.
Not to be crass, but how much do you involve, or would you involve your family, your wife, and or possibly your children in this endeavor?
Yeah. Great question. The worst kept secret in your family is that you're addicted. I would say everybody knows it, but maybe they don't know how to talk about it or how to engage it. But there will be some relief when you finally admit this is something I need to take head on. Now, depending on the nature of your addiction and the ages of your kids, that's going to require some discernment
Right.
and wisdom about how much you tell them. But when you're not managing your own stuff well, and you're coping with it dysfunctionally, that's not a secret. And the tension that creates in your committed relationships, in your parenting, that's spilling out all over the place, and it has been for a long time. And so for you to step into recovery and own the fact that Dad's going to start going to meetings. And
My kids,
that doesn't need to be a secret.
my kids, my boys, one's 19 and the other is just shy of 16. They never see me drink. But they had gone to meetings with me. Because my ex-wife seen AA at the time as a resentment because I was gone. It took me away from the family. She said, well, if you want to go to meetings, you have to take the boys with you. Thinking that was going to be a deterrent for me to go. Pack the kids up, throw the car seat in there, and high chair and diaper bag, and off to a meeting I went. They sat in a lot of speaker meetings, and now that they're older and they're able to speak to me about it and discuss it, Dad, I'm glad that you don't drink. I'm glad that you're a sober person. I'm glad because my friends, I have friends and their dads are drinkers, and I have this opportunity now that I can share with them about what I know about recovery. I as a member of AA have the responsibility to that next generation that still hasn't walked through the door.
Were you able to share that with your parents? The bitterness that the environment you grew up in?
Through journey work, Journey 2. Once I completed Journey 2 and started doing some of the footwork in Journey, I had a chance to speak to it with my mom a bit, and I wasn't like the blaming, I wasn't playing the blame game, I was just, oh, this is what I'm learning, Mom. And she's like, wow, that's like totally me. And she was identifying with the emotional incest, where she treated me like I was her best friend and vented to me about her anger with Dad. Well, the next day she's fine, and I'm still carrying that anger throughout half of my life, going, yeah, what it did. But it's well, there you go. Sorry, I'm Christian under construction.
Truth is truth.
I knew it was going to come out. That was like a minor one. Pat has experienced a major one in Bible study once.
As a whole, how does somebody attack the despair, the resentment, the things that that they fight on a daily basis as part of this?
Yep.
I mean, those are the things that won't allow a person to step out and talk to anyone about.
Yes.
I mean, how does somebody? I can't imagine being able to humble myself enough to open up to somebody. I mean, I've got some people that I ride bikes with a group of guys that are just absolutely amazing people.
Yep.
I mean, some of the best friends a person could ever have.
Yes.
And I mean, I promise you, there are some dark secrets that will never come out in that coat.
Right. Right.
So I can't imagine how to be able to do that.
Yeah. I think that's a huge question. Feeling like you have someone you can trust enough to let into that stuff is huge.
Dude, I don't even think it's a trust issue. I mean, there's a man that's here today, not necessarily in this group, but I mean, without question, trust him with my life. Trust him with the life of all 6 of the people that live in my house. Without question. I couldn't humble myself enough to talk about anything.
I respect your struggle. I do. I appreciate your honesty. It represents a lot of courage. Figuring out if you're willing to keep flying solo with that stuff, and I'll just say that to all of you guys, because what he's telling us out loud is what most of us are identifying with. I would argue and push back. I think it is actually a trust issue. Can I be fully known and fully connected, fully loved, fully accepted? No, I can't. I'll only share this much because I know you can accept this much of me, but if you knew about this other stuff, I'm not sure we could have a relationship. I couldn't look at myself in your eyes. So you talk about Satan telling you, you can't let people know what you've done, who you are. You can't. Stay isolated. I would say the only thing that's given me the courage to do that and bust that stuff open is Jesus. I mean, I've had to say, Jesus, you're going to have to be enough, because if my wife says she doesn't want me, if my kids say they don't want me, I still don't want to be alone with this stuff. So, blow it all to hell. That's how I kind of went into it.
And if it's something that has been a struggle for you, and it's laying in the back of your mind, and you're thinking, yeah, I really wish I could tell somebody, but who do I tell? You have that opportunity and that avenue to talk with someone on a one-on-one basis.
Yeah.
Somebody that's been trained and has the experience between the Christian-based counseling and some form of recovery or whatever, someone that you can talk to. And you establish that trust level and that basis with that person, with that counselor, if it be Pat or anyone else on the New Day staff, for that particular issue or problem. And they'll be able to guide you and help you talk with other people about it, and to be able to share that, or if you go through the journey classes or whatever, and it helps you unwrap that and helps you see that you're not a bad person. God does not make junk. That is like the biggest thing ever. We are God's children, and He can forgive you every else. We'll be able.
Real quick,
So, yeah, we gotta let you guys go.
You can stay and talk, but
Yep.
I just want you to be aware that if you're going to a different session,
Yeah, they're getting going in
That's
about
all.
10 minutes. The other thing I'd say about that is it is helpful sometimes to have an independent person who doesn't connect with you in any way. So a counselor. I mean, like, I don't go golfing with my proctologist. I don't want to. You're in the office, that's where you stay. So, all right, you guys, God bless you. If you want to stick around, we're here.